Hi, I'm Diane Neubauer. Du Yanzi is my Chinese name. I wanted to describe the process that I'm using for teaching Chinese using comprehension-based methods, TPRS, and other comprehensible input approaches. So hopefully this brief video will give a sense of the whole flow of instruction and might give some starting points for looking into specifics for someone who's considering teaching this way or perhaps wants to see a whole picture. So how I begin is based off of the 3 steps of TPRS, and first establishing meaning, then providing massive auditory input and interacting with that input, and then in step 3 moving to massive reading input with some sub-steps that I think are more appropriate for Chinese or other languages that have a script that's not obvious phonetically. So in step 1 we are establishing meaning. So we're showing students a few new word chunks in pinyin only and showing them the meaning in their native language. In my case, English, for almost all of my students. So by chunks, it could be a single word like 有, 没有, for a very beginning level 1 group. It could be a longer phrase like 坐飞机去, going by plane, for a little bit further along in the year. It could be something rather long and elaborate, like 离山不远, like not too far from the mountains. Just depends on how you want to introduce it. So it's not necessarily a single word, but it's not a full sentence, maybe a part of a sentence. To help connect the sound to the meaning, we can create gestures, either giving the students a gesture or eliciting their idea for how to create a gesture. TPR, or total physical response, can be very helpful, especially if those new word chunks are somehow action verbs or objects that could be easily brought into the classroom and interacted with. So there's a lot on TPR on the internet, and it's well worth looking at. Photos and images can be very helpful, not using them just as a flashcard though, but actually talking about them and thinking about them, asking the students questions about them, using those new word chunks in each time I'm asking them a question. Using realia from the culture is also a great thing. And then asking lots of questions, using those few new chunks of meaning, new phrases, new words, along the lines of personalized questions and answers, or just asking questions about photos, images, realia, and getting the students' ideas involved. As we're moving into step 2 then, we're building a little bit more developed auditory input. So like using a photo or images, we can look and discuss them. We could develop a whole backstory to a photograph that we show students that could be featuring some new part of the language that we're instructing them in. Listen and draw is a personal favorite of mine. I have, two or three main ways this can happen. Either students and I will co-create a kind of a scene by my asking them questions and occasionally throwing out a new detail and driving the storyline along, and all the students in the room draw it as we do it. Those drawings are really great to use in follow-up activities. Special chair is something developed by Spanish teacher Jody Noble. You bring a student up to the front of the room, and using those new few chunks of vocabulary as the featured pieces of language we're going to use, I ask the class questions about who is this person. Depending on the targets, do they go by plane? Where do they go by plane? Do they go by a big plane? Do they go with their mom and dad by plane? Or does she go with her best friend by plane? Or you get the idea. Asking lots of questions, using those targets, but making it personalized about the student. Not necessarily personalized with their actual life information, but with fun stuff that the students in the classroom enjoy talking about, and that the person in that special chair doesn't veto. So they have veto rights. They don't have to be talked about in any way that they don't like. Video and discuss could be using short videos that incline themselves to discussion about a few new chunks of meaning. Movie talk is a little bit of a longer thing, using full-length films developed by Dr. Ashley Hastings. And this is more of an upper level strategy. It usually gets into more non-targeted, less targeted approaches to input. And then there's story asking, which is the classic means of TPRS. So asking the class and involving perhaps some actors in the room. So the teacher may have a kind of a story skeleton in their mind, and they're asking students to contribute the interesting details that cause them to want to hear and want to respond. So the goal of step 1 and 2 is to allow students to connect sounds in the language with their meaning. Just sound to meaning. That's why I don't show characters then. In step 3A though, we're moving into reading, and so I do reading aloud with the whole class, along the lines of what Dr. Terry Waltz has done with cold character reading. So a few examples: we could type up a storyline that we created in the previous class and then read it and discuss it. So read means I might lead the reading, or at an upper level, students might lead the reading, and then I'll ask them questions about it. We could ask students opinions about it. We could compare students in the room to the person or the featured people in the reading, things like that. Listen and draw follow-ups would be using the students' sketches and then giving them captions. So I could do captions created with the students in class, or I could pre-caption them and then ask students about whether or not the caption matches the picture and those kinds of things. Improv is another thing that I like to do with sentence-long acting prompts. So sometimes created with the students, sometimes I prepare them in advance. So the students read through those, and with maybe 1 or 2 partners, they come up with a silent 5-second means of acting out the meaning of the sentence. And then the rest of the class guesses or makes an intelligent guess about which sentence they are acting. When they win, or when they're correct, that group gets to act next, or they get to appoint the next group to act. And then live typing. So this is something I think I also heard from Terry Waltz first. I don't always prepare things in advance. Sometimes it can be very helpful for the students to discuss and then have it immediately typed right there live on screen, so that they're passively getting the means of how to type in Chinese, especially for beginning levels, but they're also seeing an immediate connection. Chinese typing is based off of pinyin, at least most input methods are, and so they're seeing that pinyin up on screen quickly, followed by the characters that I'm using. So that I think can be helpful for them to see too. In step 3B then, we're giving students more semi-independent but supported reading options. They might illustrate a comic strip. Ping pong reading is my way of saying something I've heard called airplane reading or volleyball reading. The students read a sentence in Chinese, and then their partner says what it means. Their partner then reads the next sentence in Chinese, and the first student says what it means, and it continues back and forth like that. Running dictation is a little bit challenging at first, taking reading from a story and then simplifying it down into maybe 6 to 10 sentences, putting those on a list at one end of the room and having students in small teams go across the room, read that sentence, remember it, and report it back to their teammates, who then write it down and then continue until they get all of the sentences down. So it's a little bit of a competition too. You could have a prize for the most accurate group. And then embedded readings developed by Lori Clark and Michelle Whaley, and I know many others use them. So that's building a base version, a simpler version of a reading, and then giving them 2 or 3 additional versions of that storyline, adding more details and complexity each time. In step 3 then, as an option, there are some great books being produced for level 1, 2, and up now. Terry Waltz and Haiyun Liu both have books that could be used in level 1 and 2. Songs occasionally can be a great way to give that kind of reading input. As long as it's comprehensible to the students, I'm happy to use it. So, in step 3 then, the goal is to connect now familiar sound meaning chunks to how they look in print. And characters are the medium for doing that. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching.